She stood at the orphanage gates with her suitcase and nothing else. The director handed her a small rusty key. "No letters, no family, no inheritance," he said flatly. "Just this. It was left with your name on it." She stared at the key, confused. It clearly belonged to an old tractor. Why would anyone leave her this? A tractor key, and a life of unanswered questions. But when she discovered what the key unlocked, the truth shook her entire world. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from so we can bring more stories like these. Elena Brooks turned 18 on a quiet morning that didn't feel like a birthday at all. No balloons, no cake, no excited whispers from other kids. Just the familiar creak of the orphanage hallway and the chill of early dawn slipping through cracked windows. She sat on the edge of her narrow metal-framed bed, tightening the laces on her worn-out work boots. They were second-hand, third-hand really, but she kept them spotless. She kept everything spotless. When you grow up with hand-me-downs, you learn to protect every scrap you have. She glanced around her small dorm room, the same one she'd lived in for almost 8 years. The peeling wallpaper she once tried to fix with tape. The tiny dresser with one stubborn drawer. The stack of books she collected from donation boxes, mostly manuals about engines, machines, and old farm equipment. Most girls pinned up posters of singers or actors. Elena hung diagrams of tractor engines and fuel systems. Machines made sense to her. People rarely did. Downstairs, she could hear the younger kids starting to wake. Shoes thumping, whispers echoing, someone laughing too loudly. She smiled despite herself. She'd helped raise half of them, patching their shirts, fixing their toys, showing them how to braid hair or reattach a wheel on a broken scooter. But today, she wouldn't be there to help them get ready for school. Today, she was legally an adult, which meant one thing. She had to leave. No family to claim her, no savings, no place waiting for her. Just the clothes in her bag and the small dreams she kept tucked inside her heart. She stood slowly, running a hand over the frame of her bed. A quiet goodbye to the closest thing she ever had to a home. The hallway was empty when she stepped out, the lights flickering like they always did. There were no cards taped to her door, no happy birthday Elena signs, not even a nod from the director's office as she passed. That's how it had always been. Some kids get adopted at 5, some at 12, some never. Elena had never. But she'd learned long ago not to expect the world to hand her anything. She was used to earning every inch herself. "Morning, sweetheart." Elena turned. Mrs. Harriet Lowell, the only staff member who ever treated her like more than a name on a clipboard, approached carrying a small box and wearing that concerned, motherly look she saved just for Elena. "Happy birthday," Harriet whispered. Elena smiled softly. "Thanks." Harriet's eyes shimmered. "I wish it were more than this." "You've already done more than anyone else," Elena said honestly. Harriet looked away, brushing a tear. "You deserve so much more, sweetheart." A voice cut through the moment. "There you are!" The orphanage director swept toward them in crisp heels and a practiced smile. She carried a single black velvet pouch, the kind that might hold jewelry. Elena's heart skipped. A necklace? A charm? Anything sentimental? The director opened the pouch dramatically and dropped something into Elena's palm. A key. But not a house key. Not a car key. Not even a dorm key. A tractor key. Elena blinked. "Is this your parting gift?" the director said briskly. Someone mailed it here for you a few months ago, claiming it belonged to your past. I doubt it. It's probably scrap. Regardless, it's yours now. A few staff members nearby chuckled. Maybe you'll farm your future. Hope you know how to drive that thing. Imagine, who leaves a girl a tractor? Elena swallowed, forcing herself not to let their words sting. Thank you, she whispered. The director smirked, as if the whole thing were a joke. Don't lose it, or do, it hardly matters. Harriet pulled Elena aside, lowering her voice. Elena, sweetheart, I don't think this key is what they say it is. Elena studied her face. What do you mean? Harriet opened her mouth, but the director snapped. Mrs. Lowell, enough. It's junk. Harriet pressed Elena's hand tightly around the key. Keep it safe, she whispered urgently. Please. Before Elena could ask why, Harriet stepped back, clearly afraid of the director. After one final hug with Harriet, Elena slung her small duffel bag over her shoulder and walked down the long orphanage driveway. She expected someone, anyone, to call her name. A kid she helped, a teacher she respected, someone to wave goodbye. No one did, just the wind pushing through the tall grass. She closed her fingers around the key hanging from her neck. Silver, old, strangely crafted. Why a tractor key? Why from someone who supposedly knew her past? She didn't have answers, but she had the key. And sometimes, that's the beginning of a story. As she reached the main road, a rusty pickup truck slowed beside her. The driver, a farmer with sunburned arms and wide hazel eyes, leaned out his window. Girl, where'd you get that tea? Elena froze. This? She lifted it cautiously. He stared at it like she was holding a ghost. That's not just any tractor key, he said, voice shaking. That's the master key to the old Redwood Farm. Elena blinked. The what? People nearby, shop owners, a mailman, a couple walking their dog, began to gather, murmuring. But that place has been abandoned forever. No one's owned it for years. Wasn't it left to some missing man's kid? But they never found her. Elena's heart pounded. The orphanage director stormed down the hill. She has no claim to that land, the director snapped. Give the key back. Elena stepped back. No, it wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, but it was the first time in her life she had ever said no to someone who held power over her. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. The director's face turned red. Elena clutched the key so tightly it left an imprint on her skin. For the first time ever, she wasn't running. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't silent. She was standing She was standing her ground, and she had no idea the world was about to crack open around her. For a girl who'd spent her whole life being invisible, Elena Brooks had never felt more seen, and not in a way she liked. The cluster of people near the roadside had grown. A grocery clerk with a stained apron, an elderly couple who'd stopped mid-walk, two teens on bikes lingering at the edge of the group, the mailman holding letters halfway into a box, completely forgetting his route. They were all staring at her. Not at her face, at the key hanging from her neck. The farmer in the pickup truck stepped out slowly, boots crunching the gravel. He took off his cap, ran a hand through his graying hair, and approached as if she were holding something dangerous or sacred. Kid, he said quietly, I'm gonna ask you again. Where'd you get that key? Elena swallowed. Her instinct from the orphanage kicked in. Say as little as possible. Don't cause trouble. Don't make any... Oh, someone left it for me, she said carefully. At the orphanage. They said it was mine. The farmer's jaw tightened. Who? He pressed. Elena opened her mouth, but the director stormed up. heels stabbing the pavement. "That's enough," the woman snapped. "This girl is leaving our institution today. That key is simply an old trinket, nothing more." The farmer didn't even look at her. With a slow, deliberate movement, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his own keyring. Among the ordinary keys, house, truck, shed, one stood out. Old, heavy, shaped in the same peculiar way. He held it up next to Elena's. The crowd leaned in. They were almost identical. His voice dropped. "That, right there," he said, nodding at hers, "is a master key to the Redwood Farm's original machinery, designed by Amos Redwood himself. You don't just find one of those." A low murmur spread through the crowd. Redwood? The inventor? Didn't he just vanish? Poof? One day? Left that big farm to nobody. Elena felt the weight of the key suddenly double. "Redwood Farm?" she repeated quietly. I've never been there." The director cut in sharply. "Nor will you," she said. "It's irrelevant. She is an orphan leaving our care today. This is all unnecessary drama." Some of the onlookers chuckled, not quite ready to take any of this seriously. An older man with oil on his hands shrugged. "Maybe it's just a copy," he said. "Some tourist junk. Still doesn't mean the girl owns anything." A woman folded her arms. "Yeah, who leaves a whole farm to a child in an orphanage?" Another snorted. "Maybe she stole it." The words hit like a slap. Elena's stomach twisted. "I didn't steal anything," she said quickly, voice trembling despite her effort to sound calm. "They gave it to me this morning. It was in a pouch. Said someone mailed it." The director nodded stiffly. "As I said, someone sent scrap. We honored their request and handed it to her. That's all this is. Scrap." The farmer shook his head. "Scrap? This key could sell for more than your salary, ma'am." The director's smile froze. From the hill, another figure hurried down, breathless, clutching her sweater to her chest. Mrs. Harriet Lowell. Her eyes were on Elena, not the crowd. "Elena," she called. "Are you okay?" Elena exhaled slowly. Harriet's presence always steadied her. "I'm fine," she said. "They're just asking about the key." Harriet's gaze dropped to the silver shape against Elena's chest. Something like fear flickered across her face. Then sadness. Then resolve. "That key," Harriet said quietly, "is not junk." The director bristled. "Mrs. Lowell!" Harriet cut in, surprising everyone. "You told me to keep quiet about it," she said, voice shaking, but loud enough to carry. "You told me to say it was nothing, but it's not nothing." All eyes swung between them now. The director's smile turned thin. "Careful, Harriet." Harriet swallowed hard. "Elena," she said gently, "do you remember when you were about 4, 5? You used to wake up from naps crying about tractors." The crowd blinked. Elena frowned. "I did?" Harriet nodded. "You'd say, 'The big green machine, the one Dad drives.'" "Dad?" The word felt foreign on her tongue. Harriet's voice dropped. "I always wondered where those memories came from." A chill ran down Elena's spine. The director interrupted sharply. "That is enough fantasy for one day. Mrs. Lowell, you are not authorized to—" Harriet turned to her, something fiery lighting in her eyes. "Authorized?" she echoed. "You were authorized to hide letters. You were authorized to hide files. You were authorized to hide the truth from her." The crowd gasped. "Hide what?" someone whispered. The director's face went pale, then red. "That's a serious accusation," she snapped. "You are hysterical." But the way she said, too defensive. People noticed. They always did, when it was no longer convenient to pretend nothing was wrong. The farmer shook his head slowly. I don't know what you're hiding, he said, eyes on the director. But I know one thing. That key? It's not a joke. He looked at Elena, really looked, studying her features. You got his eyes, he murmured. Whose? Elena asked. Amos Redwood. He pointed toward the distant hills, where the silhouette of an abandoned windmill stood like a crooked finger against the sky. That man built half the machines in this county. Smartest mechanic-engineer hybrid we ever had. Then one day, he disappeared. Farm locked, will contested, no heir found. He glanced at the director again. Or so we were told. Elena's heart pounded. Why? Why would someone leave me his key? She whispered. No one answered. Not yet. The director straightened her blazer, regaining some of her practiced composure. This has gone far enough, she declared. The girl has no identification connecting her to anyone named Redwood. She was left at our doorstep as an infant. We have no reason to assume she has rights to anything. The key was likely a cruel prank. Elena flinched. That was the story she'd been told her whole life. Left on the steps, no history, no family. No questions asked, no answers given. A teen from the edge of the crowd muttered, "Man, that's cold." Someone else nodded. Why not at least let her check the farm? The director snapped. Because it's trespassing. And because people like to attach themselves to what doesn't belong to them. Her eyes flicked to Elena as she said it. It stung more than Elena wanted to admit. For a second, the old familiar doubt crept back in. Maybe this is all a mistake. Maybe I'm just clinging to the first thing that ever felt like it might be mine. Her fingers loosened slightly on the key. Then Harriet spoke again. No, she said. She has a right to know. The director rounded on her. You're overstepping, and you're hiding things, Harriet burst out, tears spilling over now. I've seen the file. You removed pages. You locked away letters. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my job. But she's 18 now. She has a right to the truth. Silence fell like a dropped stone. The crowd watched, breath held. Elena felt the ground tilt. Files? She whispered. Letters? Harriet met her eyes. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. A new voice cut through the tension. Calm, measured, authoritative. Seems like this conversation needs to move somewhere, more official. Everyone turned. A tall man in a simple button-down shirt and worn slacks stepped forward from the back of the crowd. His hair was neatly combed, but a 5 o'clock shadow hinted at long days and late nights. His brown eyes were sharp, taking everything in. He held up a badge. Aaron Miles, he said, county detective. The director's smile snapped back into place like a poorly fitted mask. Oh, Detective Miles, she said with forced pleasantness. There's really no need for... He ignored her, looking at Elena. Mind if I get a closer look at that key? Elena hesitated, then nodded. She lifted it by the chain, letting it dangle. He stepped closer, examining it without touching. Stamped initials, he murmured. AR, custom-cut teeth, reinforced stem. This is no standard issue. He looked at the farmer. She's right? The man nodded. That's Amos Redwood's work, the farmer confirmed. I'd bet my truck on it. Detective Miles turned back to Elena. And someone mailed this to you, he said, specifically. On your file, at the orphanage. Yes, she said. They said it came a few months ago. Today's the first I saw it. His jaw tightened. And no one thought to investigate who sent it? The director answered quickly. But we receive donations and odd trinkets all the time, detective. It's not our responsibility to chase every mysterious stranger. Maybe it is, Harriet whispered, when it's addressed to a specific child who's never had anything. Detective Miles' eyes flicked between them. Then he said something that made Elena's knees go weak. Miss Brooks, have you ever seen a picture of Amos Redwood? She shook her head. No. He reached slowly into his pocket and took out his phone. A few taps later, he turned the screen toward her. An old news article. A photo. A man in his late 30s, wearing grease-stained overalls, standing in front of a tractor. Hair a little wild. Strong jaw, tired but kind eyes. Eyes that looked like hers. Her heart stopped. She stammered. I look like him. Detective Miles nodded. You do. The director stepped between them. Voice stiff. This is ridiculous. She looks like half the town. Dark hair, brown eyes. What of it? She is no one special. Just a girl who aged out of our system. The words hit like a slap. No one special. It was the label that clung to her from childhood. Elena stared at the director. Then, slowly, she shook her head. For 18 years, she said softly. You called me that. Her fingers tightened around the key again. But someone out there mailed this with my name on it. She lifted the key. The crowd watched, quiet and intent. That means I matter to someone, she continued, voice gaining strength. Maybe not to you, but to someone. The director scoffed. Detective Miles slipped his phone back into his pocket. Miss Brooks, he said, would you be willing to come with me to Redwood Farm? Every muscle in Elena's body tensed. The farm? She whispered. He nodded. If that key really belongs there, and if what Mrs. Lowell says about hidden files is true, then you might not be that. The crowd buzzed again. Is she the heir? Could she be his kid? This is like something out of a movie. The director snapped. She is not leaving with you. She's under our responsibility until midnight tonight, and I'll be reporting your interference to... Detective Miles raised his badge again. Ma'am, with accusations of concealed documentation and possible inheritance theft, you'll be answering to more than me. Then he turned to Elena. It's your choice, he said, but I think that key wants to show you where it belongs. Elena looked from him to Harriet's tearful eyes, to the distant silhouette of the old windmill on the hill. Her whole life, she'd had nothing but questions. Maybe it was time for answers. She swallowed hard. I'll go, she said. Her voice was steady. For the first time in 18 years, her next step wasn't being decided by a director, a rule, or a system. She was following a key, and she had no idea it was about to unlock her entire life. The drive out to Redwood Farm felt like moving through a memory she didn't know she had. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Detective Aaron Miles' county SUV, her duffel bag at her feet, the tractor key cool and solid in her hand. Outside her window, the town slowly gave way to open fields, tall grass, crooked fence posts, and the distant line of hills that seemed to hold the sky in place. It wasn't far, but every passing mile felt like a step away from the only life she'd ever known, and toward the one someone had kept from her. Detective Miles drove calmly, eyes on the road, hands steady at 10 and 2. He didn't push her to talk, didn't fill the silence with meaningless noise. Elena appreciated that. Silence, she understood. Noise, she didn't trust. Still, questions rattled in her chest like loose bolts in an engine. What if it's all a mistake? She blurted suddenly. He glanced at her briefly. What part? The key? The farm? That man in the picture? She swallowed. What if I just want it to mean something so badly that I'm forcing it to? Aaron's mouth tugged faintly at one corner. That wanting something doesn't create birth certificates, he said, or letters, or patents, or missing heirs. Missing heirs? He nodded. I've looked into Amos Redwood's case before, he admitted. When a man like that disappears, wealthy, brilliant, controversial, it raises questions. He left behind inventions, land, Unfinished projects. There were whispers about a child, but no one ever proved anything. Elena gripped the key tighter. Because the child was in an orphanage, she said quietly. Maybe, he replied. That's what we're here to find out. They turned down a dirt road almost swallowed by tall grass. The SUV rattled over potholes and stones. There it is, Aaron said quietly. Elena leaned forward. Redwood Farm rose up ahead like something out of a half-remembered dream. A weathered farmhouse with peeling white paint. A huge barn, one door hanging crooked. A pair of single-blade windmills creaking in the breeze. Rust-red silos streaked with age. And right in front of it all, a tractor. Old, green under the rust. Parked like it had only been left there yesterday. Elena's heart thudded. The air smelled like dust and dry soil and something else. Oil. Faint. Familiar. Detective Miles parked and got out first, scanning the area automatically. Stay close, he said. Place has been abandoned forever, but that doesn't mean people don't come snooping around. She stepped out slowly, boots crunching gravel, the wind tugging at her hair. The farm felt still, not dead, just sleeping, waiting. Her eyes went straight to the tractor. She didn't have to be told. She knew exactly what this moment was for. Go on, Aaron said gently, reading her expression. If that key belongs anywhere, it's there. She approached the machine in slow, reverent steps. Paint chipped, tires cracked, seats worn. But the controls? Perfect. She brushed a hand over the steering wheel, feeling grooves worn by another pair of hands long ago. Large hands, strong hands, hands that maybe looked like hers. The ignition slot waited on the right side of the wheel, a small, circular opening rimmed with metal. Her fingers trembled. She lifted the chain over her head. The key felt heavier than it had in town, heavier than it had at the orphanage. She pressed it into the ignition. It slid in like it had never belonged anywhere else. Her breath caught. She glanced back at Aaron. He nodded once. Turn it. Elena swallowed and twisted the key. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the engine coughed. A sputter, a grind, a deep internal shudder like a sleeping giant stretching after a long nap. Then, the motor roared to life. Not shaky, not hesitant. Smooth, powerful. Like it had been run yesterday. A flock of birds startled from the barn roof. Elena's mouth fell open. How is that? She cut the engine quickly, the sound echoing away across the fields. Aaron stared too, impressed despite himself. 15 years out here, he said. No maintenance, no fuel fills, no tune-ups, and it starts like that? Elena slid off the step, legs unsteady. Only if it was built to, she said quietly. He looked at her. You understand engines, he guessed. She gave a small, almost shy smile. Better than I understand people. As she moved away from the seat, something caught her eye. A metal glint under the worn vinyl cushion. Wait, she murmured. She pressed her fingers into the seam where the cushion met the metal frame. It lifted with a faint creak, revealing a narrow compartment built into the seat itself. Inside sat a small, rust-dusted metal box. Rectangular. Plain. Locked with a tiny latch. Elena's hand shook as she picked it up. Detective, she whispered. Aaron stepped closer. Let me see. He examined the latch. Does your key fit this too? She looked down. The tractor key had a second, smaller tooth at the end. She hadn't noticed before. Her heart pounded. She pushed the tip into the latch. With a tiny click, it opened. She drew a breath. Inside the box were 4 things. A folded document. A stack of papers with technical sketches. A thin envelope. and a photograph. The photograph sat on top. Her fingers barely dared to touch it. A man with messy hair, oil-smeared overalls, and tired, kind eyes stood in front of this very tractor. And in his arms, a baby, wrapped in a blanket, eyes closed, tiny fist pressed to her cheek. On the back, in faint ink, someone had written, "Elena, 3 months." The world tilted. Her knees nearly buckled. Aaron caught her elbow. "Easy," he said. She couldn't. "That's me." Her mind screamed silently. "That's me! That's me! That's me!" No one had ever shown her a baby picture, because someone didn't want her to have one. Hands trembling, she reached for the folded document next. Aaron gently guided her to sit on a low stone near the barn before she collapsed. She unfolded the paper. Her name jumped out at her. Elena Redwood Brooks, date of birth, place of birth. Father, Amos Luke Redwood. Mother, undisclosed. Her eyes blurred. "Redwood," she whispered. She had asked for years, "Do I have a last name? Where did Brooks come from?" They always shrugged. "Paperwork," the director would say. "We had to put something." That had been a lie. Her fingers dug into the page. Next, she picked up the schematics. Carefully drawn diagrams of modified tractors, wind energy converters, small engine designs with annotations in the margins. In the corner of each sheet, property of A. Redwood, for Elena's future. Someone had planned for it. Someone who understood what she loved before she even knew she loved it. Finally, she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, the edges yellowed. She recognized the same handwriting from the back of the photograph. She began to read. "My daughter, if you're reading this, then something went wrong." Her throat tightened instantly. "I planned to come back for you. I swear to you, I did. But there are people who want what I've built. People who wouldn't think twice about hurting anyone close to me to get it. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I put you somewhere safe, somewhere hidden. I left this key with my lawyer and told him to send it when you turned 18. Elena's hands shook so badly, she almost dropped the page. 18. Today. This farm, these designs, this land, they are all yours. By right, by blood, by love. I don't know if I'll be alive when you use this key, but I built everything here with one thing in mind. That one day, my daughter would have a place in this world that nobody could take from her." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She barely noticed. If they told you no one wanted you, they lied. If they told you you were nothing, they lied. You were always my everything. Your father, Amos Redwood. The page blurred completely. She folded into herself, letter clutched to her chest, sobs breaking free from somewhere deep, long buried. For 18 years, she had lived with the quiet ache of not being chosen, of not being claimed, of not belonging to anyone. And here, on old paper stained with engine grease and time, a man she'd never met, claimed her, wanted her, loved her. Aaron stood a few feet away, giving her a gentle radius of privacy. He'd seen grief, he'd seen shock, he'd seen reunions and breakdowns and anger. But there was something uniquely raw about watching a girl who had never had a before suddenly collide with the truth of it. When her sobs finally quieted to soft, shaky breaths, he stepped closer. "Elena," he said quietly. She lifted her head, eyes red, cheeks streaked. "You okay?" It was a stupid question, but also the only one that made sense in moments like this. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "I have a father," she whispered. I mean, had. I don't even know if he's... But he existed, and he fought about me. And this place is... She looked around the farm. It's mine. Words she'd never been able to say. Aaron nodded slowly. It looks that way. Her joy was interrupted by the weight of another realization. If this was left for me, she said slowly, voice darkening, then someone chose not to give it to me. For years. Aaron's jaw tightened. Oh, I plan to find out exactly who that someone is, he said. And why? He glanced back at. The director fought pretty hard to dismiss that key as trash. They don't fight that hard over nothing. If there were documents, letters. His eyes hardened. We're not done. Elena stood slowly. Her legs felt weak, but there was steel forming in her spine. She looked at the farmhouse again, then the barn, then the fields stretching beyond. Her land, her father's legacy, her name. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. When you go back to the orphanage, she said quietly, I'm going with you. Aaron raised a brow. Are you sure? She nodded, eyes blazing now through the leftover tears. For 18 years, people made decisions for me, she said. If someone stole my future, she looked back at the tractor. I want to be there when they're exposed. The engine inside the tractor was silent again. But something else had started running. Something far more powerful. For the first time in her life, Elena wasn't just reacting to the world she was stepping into, as Amos Redwood's daughter, as herself. And soon, the people who tried to bury that truth were going to feel the ground shake beneath them. Detective Aaron Miles wasn't the kind of man who rushed. He didn't bark orders or flash his badge around to intimidate people. But when he turned the SUV back toward town, Elena felt a shift in the air, like a storm had begun to form quietly behind his calm eyes. He wasn't angry. He was focused, purposeful, determined. And underneath all of that, protective. Elena sat beside him, her father's letter folded carefully in her lap, the birth certificate tucked safely into her bag, the photograph pressed against her heart. The key, now clearly the symbol of everything she'd never been allowed to know, hung warm against her skin. She wasn't letting go of it ever again. When they pulled up in front of Brooksview Orphanage, the same building that had raised her and failed her, Elena felt her throat tighten. She had walked out this morning. But coming back now, knowing the truth they'd kept from her, that was different. Harriet Lowell was waiting at the door, wringing her hands, eyes red, like she'd been crying ever since Elena left. The director stood just inside, arms crossed, jaw tight. The moment Detective Miles stepped out, Harriet rushed toward Elena first. "Elena," she whispered, voice trembling. "Are you okay? Did you find anything?" Elena nodded. Harriet's face cracked. "Oh, sweetheart." The director stepped forward sharply. "All right, that's enough emotional theatrics," she snapped. "Detective, this is a private institution. You can't." Aaron held up a hand, badge glinting. "I can, and I will." His voice was calm, but carried weight. "We're investigating potential inheritance mishandling, suppressed documentation, and possible identity concealment." A murmur spread among the staff, lingering in the doorway. The director's smile was tight and cold. "You are overreacting. There is nothing to find. The girl was abandoned. No family, no history, no connection to anyone but the state." Harriet flinched. Elena's jaw tightened. Detective Miles nodded once. "Then you won't mind showing me her file." The director hesitated, just for a split second, but it was enough. Aaron saw it, Elena saw it, Harriet definitely saw it. "There is nothing," the director began. "Show me," Aaron repeated softly. The director's heels clicked furiously as she led them down the empty hallway, past peeling paint and old bulletin boards. Harriet followed close behind, hovering protectively near Elena. They reached the records room, a cramped space lined with metal filing cabinets. The director unlocked one drawer with a huff, pulled out a folder with Elena's name on it, and slapped it onto the table. "There," she said. "Everything we have." Aaron didn't touch it yet. He watched her instead. "You seem awfully defensive about a simple folder." "I'm tired of accusations," she shot back, but there was sweat along her hairline. Harriet's hands trembled at her sides. "Elena," she whispered, I think there should be more in there." Aaron opened the folder. Inside, a thin medical summary, a generic intake form, a few school reports, a faded photograph of Elena at age 6, and nothing else. Elena felt something cold slide down her spine. "My entire life fits into 10 pages?" she asked quietly. The director folded her arms. "It's what we were given." Aaron didn't buy it. "Where are the letters?" he asked. The director blinked. "Letters?" "The ones addressed to Elena over the years," Harriet said, stepping forward. "I saw some. I know what I saw." The director snapped. "You saw nothing. You misunderstood." Harriet's voice broke. "No, I didn't. There were envelopes, stamped, with her name on them. And you said that they were hoaxes," the director barked. "People send nonsense to orphanages all the time." Aaron lifted one eyebrow. "Enough that you hid them?" The director's lips thinned. Harriet whispered, "She locked them in her office drawer. I wasn't allowed to give them to Elena." Elena's pulse roared in her ears. Letters. Someone had written to her. Someone had tried. "Where are they?" Aaron asked. The director turned to him, annoyed and cornered. "I told you. They were hoaxes. Junk. Trash." Aaron stepped closer. "Ma'am, withholding mail is a federal offense." His voice hardened. "Where are the letters?" The director wavered. Elena felt years of quiet obedience burning into something sharper. She stepped forward herself. "You told me no one ever wrote to me," she said, voice trembling. "No one cared. No one asked." The director opened her mouth, but Elena didn't stop. "You let me believe I was unwanted." Her voice cracked. "Even when someone was trying to find me." Harriet broke into tears. "Oh, sweetheart." Aaron placed a steady hand on Elena's shoulder, grounding her, reminding her she wasn't alone anymore. The director's face changed. Something cold and calculating slid into place. "I don't know what you think was hidden," she said, "but you have no proof. None. And without proof, this conversation is finished." She turned to leave. Aaron didn't move. "You just made my job a whole lot easier," he said. The director paused. "Excuse me?" He held up his phone. "Because I recorded this entire conversation." Her eyes widened. "You can't!" "I can," he said firmly, "and now I have evidence of potential obstruction." Harriet gasped softly. The director paled. "But we'll still need the letters," Aaron said calmly. "All of them." Elena stared at the older woman who had been the closest thing she had to authority her entire life. The director swallowed. Then, without a word, she reached into a lower cabinet, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a small cardboard box. She set it on the table with a thud. Elena's heart stopped. There were envelopes inside, dozens, all addressed to her. Some yellowed with age, some newer, some stamped with return addresses, some marked "Return to Sender." Harriet sobbed openly now. Oh God, they were for you all along. Elena reached out, hands shaking violently, and lifted the top envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, the same as the letter she found under the tractor seat. Her father's writing. She almost dropped it. Aaron steadied her wrist. "It's okay," he murmured, but Elena's voice was broken glass. "He wrote to me," she whispered, "all these years, and she hid them." The director opened her mouth to defend herself, but Harriet snapped in a voice Elena had never heard from the gentlewoman. "Don't even!" The director flinched. Aaron reached for an evidence bag. "These are coming with us." The director stepped back. The room felt too small for all the lies that had lived inside it. Elena gathered the box in her arms. It felt heavier than anything she'd ever carried. Letters, words, love, time. Things meant for her, things stolen from her. She turned to Harriet. "Thank you," she whispered. Harriet covered her mouth, crying. "I should have done more," she sobbed. "I should have fought harder. Elena, I'm so sorry." Elena hugged her, the first hug she'd felt like giving all day. When she stepped back, her eyes were steady. No more trembling, no more shrinking, no more believing she was worth nothing. "Detective Miles," she said softly, "I'm ready." He nodded. "Then let's go finish this." They walked out of the orphanage together, leaving the director pale and speechless in the record room. Outside, the wind brushed Elena's face, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was standing on the edge of truth instead of the shadow of a lie. The sun was dipping low when Elena and Detective Miles pulled back into Redwood Farm. Golden light stretched across the fields, setting the tall grass glowing like embers. But Elena barely felt the beauty of it. Her arms still clutched the box of stolen letters. Her mind still echoed with Harriet's sobs and the director's lies, and the weight of 18 years that suddenly made cruel sense. Aaron parked beside the old farmhouse and cut the engine. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he said quietly, "You don't have to open those here if you're not ready." Elena stared at the box. "No," she whispered, "I need to." She stepped out into the cool air, walked toward the barn, and sat on the wooden step, the one spot that felt steady under her feet. Aaron stayed close, but didn't crowd her. The windmill creaked overhead. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried. Elena opened the lid. She picked one at random, a medium-sized envelope, edges softened by age. Dot. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her throat tightened. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet, creased from being folded for years. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. "Elena, they won't tell me where you are. They say I have no rights. But I know you're out there somewhere. I'm building something for you. A place. A future. Keep holding on." A tear hit the page. Her breath shuddered. Another envelope. "My girl, they threatened me today. Told me to stop asking questions about you. I won't. I promise. I won't stop until you're home." Her heart clenched. Envelope after envelope. Some quick, desperate. "They lied to me. They said you were placed elsewhere. But I know that's not true." Some tender, written like bedtime stories. "I fixed the tractor again today. Someday, I'll teach you how it works." Some heartbreaking. "I saw your baby photo again. You had my nose. I cried today. I miss someone I've never properly met." And then, one letter shook loose from the bottom of the box. It was different. Dark blue ink, thicker paper, a wax seal cracked down the middle. Elena's breath caught. She opened it carefully. "My daughter, if this letter is reaching you, It means I failed to come back for you." A sob tightened in her chest. Erin stepped closer, silent and respectful. "I didn't disappear by accident. They came for my work, my inventions, and they said if I didn't cooperate." The next part was smudged. The ink streaked like someone's hand had shaken. "I had to keep you hidden. I had to place you where no one would think to look. Somewhere ordinary, somewhere safe." She swallowed hard. "The orphanage. I trusted people I shouldn't have. I thought they'd care for you. I thought they'd send you my letters at least." He knew they wouldn't. He'd suspected. "If you never received them, then I'm sorry. I should have fought harder." Her tears fell faster. "But know this, nothing in this world mattered to me more than you. Not the farm, not the machines, not the inventions they wanted. You were the only thing I created that mattered." Elena pressed the letter to her chest, shoulders shaking. She had dreamed of someone saying that to her entire life. She didn't know it would hurt so much to finally hear it. The barn floor creaked suddenly as she stood. A loose board shifted near her foot. Erin looked up. "Careful, this place is falling apart." But something about the sound tugged at her. She knelt and pressed her palm against the plank. It wasn't loose from rot. It was loose, like a lid. She wedged her fingers under the edge and pulled gently. The board rose. Under it lay a narrow, dust-lined cavity. Inside, a rolled map, a tin cylinder, 2 old notebooks, and a small, metal-latched box identical to the one under the tractor seat. Elena's pulse surged. She lifted the box. Her father's initials, A.R., were etched I. Her hands shook violently as she opened the latch. Inside, stacks of documents, receipts, blueprints, photographs of farm equipment and small engines. And at the very bottom, a single folded sheet, yellowed, fragile, addressed to "For Elena, when she is grown." Her breath trembled as she unfolded it. "Elena, if you're reading this, then you survived everything they tried to take from you. You survived the lies. You survived being alone. I left you this land because they couldn't take it. I built machines they couldn't steal, and I hid what mattered most. You." Elena choked on a sob. "You may hate me for leaving you there. You may not understand, but please know this. Every invention I ever built was in preparation for the day you and I would live here together." A shaky smile broke through her tears. "You were always meant to be here. You were always meant to build." Her fingers traced the final line. "If the world ever makes you doubt who you are, listen to the tractor. It knows your hands. It knows your blood. It knows your name." The page slipped from her fingers as she covered her mouth, sobbing into her palms. She wasn't abandoned. She wasn't forgotten. She wasn't unloved. She had been protected. Maybe imperfectly, maybe painfully, but fiercely. And suddenly, the anger didn't drown her. The grief didn't crush her. Something else rose instead. Resolve, strength, belonging, a fire she'd never had the right to feel until now. Erin knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "You okay?" he asked softly. She wiped her face with her sleeve. "No," she whispered truthfully, "but I will be." He nodded. "You know this isn't the end," he said. "If someone hid your inheritance, they may have taken more." She looked at the farm, the tractor, the barn, the windmills silhouetted against the fading sun. Then she looked at the letters. "My father gave me enough to start," she said, voice steadier now. "Now it's my turn." Erin's eyes tightened slightly with admiration. "You sound like him." She inhaled deeply, letting the cool air fill her chest. "No," she said softly. I sound like me, the girl he knew I could be. The storm wasn't rain. It wasn't wind. It was truth. It was justice. It was Elena stepping into the life someone tried to erase. She stood, clutching her father's final letter. "Detective," she said with new strength, "let's finish this." Aaron nodded and rose beside her. They walked back toward the farmhouse together, the box of letters held securely in her arms. The sun dipped below the fields, but for the first time in her life, Elena felt like a sunrise was waiting for her. Detective Miles didn't wait. The moment they left Redwood Farm, he drove straight to the county office with Elena's box of letters in the back seat. This time, Elena didn't sit quietly. She didn't shrink. She didn't doubt herself. She sat upright, arms crossed, jaws set. She was done being the girl no one believed. She was ready to be the heir someone tried to erase. The county clerk reviewed the letters, the birth certificate, and the farm documents. Her face went pale. This is a full inheritance package," she whispered. "It should have been given to her the moment she turned 12. 12? Elena repeated. "Yes, your father set the trust to activate at 12, not 18. Elena's stomach dropped. 6 extra years of poverty, 6 years of working odd jobs, 6 years of being told she was worth nothing. All because someone hid everything meant for her. Detective Miles leaned in. "Who signed for the documents when they arrived?" The clerk clicked through the system. One name appeared. Martha Glenwood, director of Brooksview Orphanage. Elena's blood went cold. She signed and immediately marked the items as lost in transit. The clerk said, "Aaron E., that's theft," he muttered. "That's fraud. That's identity suppression." Elena whispered, "She stole my entire life." They returned to the orphanage. This time, Detective Miles didn't knock gently. He walked in with a file in his hand and fire in his eyes. The director stood frozen in her doorway. "You knew," Elena said quietly, "all these years. You knew who I was." The woman faltered. "You don't understand." "No," Elena said, stepping forward. "I understand perfectly." She held up the final letter from her father. "You kept the child from her family for money," Elena said. "You took what wasn't yours. You decided my future without ever asking me." The director's mask finally cracked. "I needed the funding," she snapped. "If you left with the inheritance, the orphanage would have lost thousands. I did what I had to do." Elena froze. "You used me," she whispered. "No," the woman corrected coldly. "I used your name." Detective Miles stepped forward. "Talk." Voice. "That's theft," he muttered. "That's fraud. That's identity suppression." Elena whispered. "She stole my entire life." They returned to the orphanage. This time, Detective Miles didn't knock gently. He walked in with a file in his hand and fire in his eyes. The director stood frozen in her doorway. "You knew," Elena said quietly. "All these years, you knew who I was." The woman faltered. "You don't understand." "No," Elena said, stepping forward. "I understand perfectly." She held up the final letter from her father. "You kept a child from her family for money," Elena said. "You took what wasn't yours. You decided my future without ever asking me." The director's mask finally cracked. "I needed the funding," she snapped. "If you left with the inheritance, the orphanage would have lost thousands. I did what I had to do." Elena froze. "You used me," she whispered. "No," the woman corrected coldly. "I used your name." Detective Miles stepped forward. "And now you're under investigation for fraud, mail tampering, financial theft, and coercion." The director's face collapsed. Harriet Lowell, standing behind Elena, let out a relieved sob. "Thank God someone finally said it," she whispered. As officers arrived to escort the director away, Elena didn't feel anger. She felt clarity. She felt the weight of what had been stolen, yes, but also the strength of what remained. Her father's legacy, her land, her skills, her truth, her name. Detective Miles placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You handled that with more strength than most adults I know. Elena exhaled. I've been surviving my whole life, she said softly. Now I want to live. Harriet hugged her tightly. You're free now, sweetheart. For the first time, Elena believed it. She stepped outside the orphanage doors and didn't look back. Ahead of her, the road, the farm, the future her father built for her. And she whispered into the breeze. Redwood Farm looked different when Elena returned. The wind felt warmer. The fields felt brighter. The old farmhouse didn't look abandoned anymore. It looked waiting for her. Detective Miles helped unload the box of letters and documents onto the kitchen table. Dust floated through the air like soft reminders of everything lost and everything now found. You're officially the owner, he said, handing her the signed county paperwork. Land, equipment, patents, everything you need to begin anew. Accounts, everything Amos Redwood left behind. All yours. Elena's chest tightened. All her life she had nothing. Now she had everything meant for her. Word spread quickly through the small town. Former workers stopped by. Local farmers brought tools. Teens offered to help clean the barn. And Mrs. Harriet Lowell, now free from the director's grip, arrived with groceries and tears in her eyes. You don't have to do this alone, she said, placing flour and apples on the counter. I should have protected you then. I'm here now, Elena hugged her tightly. I'm here now too. Together they swept, hammered, repaired, polished. The windmill creaked back to life. The barn roof was patched. And most importantly, Elena set up her first real workshop. Rusty tractor parts lined the walls. Blueprints from her father hung above the workbench. Wrenches, wires, gears, spare motors. Everything she loved, everything she understood, finally belonged to her. Harriet watched her weld a bracket with confident, steady hands. Your father would be proud, she whispered. Elena smiled softly. I finally feel like I can be proud of myself too. Elena didn't keep the farm just for her own survival. She reopened Redwood Farm as a restoration shop for old engines, training space for kids aging out of the orphanage, community hub for young mechanics, tribute to her father's inventions. Soon, teens from Brooksview began showing up, nervous, hopeful, looking fee. She gave them tools, patience, safety, a place to build something with their hands the way she once did alone. One boy whispered, Miss Elena, why are you doing this? She smiled, because someone tried to take my future, and I'm not letting anyone take yours. Weeks later, Miles stood in her workshop doorway, watching her instruct 3 teens. You look at home, he said. She wiped grease off her cheek. For the first time, I am. He handed her a folder. The orphanage director pled guilty, he said. And your father's patents? They're worth more than anyone realized. She raised an eyebrow. How much more? He chuckled. Enough to fund this place for years. Elena glanced around the workshop. The teens learning, the engines humming, the light falling across her father's blueprints. This isn't a farm anymore, she said softly. It's a future. That evening, Elena stood on the hill overlooking Redwood Farm. The sunset spilled gold across the fields. The tractor, restored and shining, sat proudly in the yard. She whispered, Dad, I made it. not as the abandoned girl they tried to erase, not as the orphan nobody claimed, not as the child who grew up believing she had no name, but as Elena Redwood, daughter of a genius, master of her craft, protector of forgotten kids, the rightful heir to everything she was meant to be. She took a deep breath. Tomorrow, more teens would arrive. More engines would be restored. More futures would be rebuilt. Because this farm wasn't a relic. It was a beginning. The next morning, Elena sat on the tractor's metal step, the early light washing everything gold. Dew clung to the grass. The windmills turned lazily, creaking the way they must have when her father stood in this same spot years ago. She held his final letter in her hands, not clutching it out of fear anymore, but holding it the way someone holds a compass, something that points true. Kids' voices echoed from inside the barn, laughing, arguing playfully, dropping tools, picking them up. Her workshop wasn't silent anymore. It was alive. She smiled. All her life she'd been taught she was nobody, a number, a file in a drawer, a girl no one wanted. But the truth was louder than the lies. She had always been somebody. She whispered the line from his letter that changed everything. If the world ever makes you doubt who you are, listen to the tractor. She reached out and touched the restored hood. The engine inside felt warm, not from running, but from her father's hands and her own. 2 lives, 2 generations, 1 shared craft. It knows your hands, she whispered. It knows your name. And finally, so did she. The teens gathered in the doorway. "Miss Elena," a small girl called, "is today welding lessons?" "In a minute," Elena said, standing. "I want you all to learn something first." They quieted. She gestured to the tractor, to the barn, to the tools, to the field stretching wide and endless. "This place was almost stolen from me," she said. "Just like your futures could be stolen, if no one fights for you." They listened harder than any classroom ever made them. "But you're not alone. Not here. Not anymore." A boy raised his hand shyly. "Why do you help us?" Elena smiled gently. "Because someone hid my past," she said. "And now I get to help you build yours." The kids exchanged soft, hopeful smiles. Somewhere deep inside her chest, a place that had been empty since childhood finally filled. Elena looked out over Redwood Farm as the sun climbed higher, bright and steady. "All my life," she whispered, "I thought I had nothing." Her gaze moved over the tractors she had restored, the workshop she built from ruins, and the young faces waiting for her guidance. But I had everything I needed the moment I picked up a key. She hung her father's letter inside the barn where everyone could see. Some inherit money. Some inherit land. Some inherit nothing at all. But Elena, she inherited purpose, future, strength, identity. A place where broken things and broken people could be rebuilt. She turned to the kids. "Let's get to work." They cheered and rushed toward their tools. Elena stepped into her workshop, sunlight flooding in behind her. She didn't look like a forgotten orphan anymore. She looked like a woman who finally unlocked the life she was always meant to live. And the world would never forget her again.